Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the absolutely epic leadership blunder that ultimately crushed Lehman Brothers. It's a story that proves without a shadow of a doubt that unchecked ego is a leader's absolute worst enemy. When we look back at massive organizations that just completely collapse, it is rarely just a run of bad luck, right? It's almost always this series of deliberate choices, a perfect storm of hubris. So let's get right into it. Are big banks too smart to fail? I mean, it's a really provocative question, isn't it? We look at these massive, towering institutions, and we just kind of assume there's this underlying level of pure genius operating behind closed doors, something that makes them basically invincible. And the leaders at Lehman Brothers, they absolutely believed they were invincible, right up until disaster actually struck. They totally bought into their own myth. They really thought their sheer size and intellect made them completely immune to the laws of financial gravity. But as we're going to see in the source material, literally no one is too smart to fail when they completely lose touch with reality. Which brings us to our first major point, the too smart myth and a cascade of bad choices. So here's how that cascade actually played out. First off, Lehman's leaders aggressively chased after risky profits over any sort of stable growth. They were just so incredibly hungry for those massive, high-risk payouts. Then, number two, they completely ignored glaring systemic warning signs. They actively chose to just look the other way, even when the underlying data was literally screaming for caution. And finally, they stubbornly refused to change course. I mean, even when the financial ground started shifting right beneath their feet, they just doubled down. They locked themselves into this incredibly rigid path of destruction, mostly because turning back would mean they'd have to admit they were fundamentally wrong. And that right there is what we call the ego trap. Once they were stuck inside that ego trap, transparency just vanished, gone. Leadership actively hid the bad news, sweeping failing numbers and all these negative projections right under the rug. And instead of restructuring, they doubled down again, recklessly gambling with toxic assets. Guys, they literally took the financial equivalent of poison and treated it like it was the cure, making these incredibly dangerous bets. And the root cause of the whole shebang? They let their own ego completely run the show. When ego takes the steering wheel, logic and self-preservation just get thrown right out the window. They cared way more about looking right than actually securing the firm. So, naturally, that leads us directly into the inevitable crash. Think about their strategy for a second. Plan A was basically betting the entire firm on this high-stakes, incredibly dangerous strategy of holding toxic assets. It was just a manufactured illusion of safety. But Plan B was zero. Nothing. Zilch. They had absolutely no contingency or backup plan in place. None. So when the market finally crashed and reality actually demanded to be recognized, they reached for a safety net that simply did not exist. They were just so blinded by their own hubris that they never even entertained the possibility of failure. The results? Pure, unadulterated chaos. Because they so deliberately ignored reality, the absolute lack of a plan B meant there was nothing left to catch them. No padding, no strategic retreat, no way out at all. Just total chaos as the entire institution crumbled under the overwhelming weight of its toxic assets. It's a stark, terrifying reminder of exactly what happens when the illusion shatters. Let's look at the lessons for modern leaders. The source material leaves us with this incredible quote: "Even the biggest names can fall if leaders ignore reality." It's a really clear warning. Please don't make the same mistake they did. Because look, no matter your size, no matter your past success or how smart you think your team is, ego and the refusal to face facts, that will always be a recipe for absolute disaster. The ego trap isn't just some Wall Street problem. It's a deeply human problem. So as you go forward in your own projects and your own leadership roles, I want you to ask yourself this: are you objectively looking at the cold hard facts, or are you just letting your ego run the show?